Bam.
Hello, everyone. This is The Rabbit Hole, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Yeah, we're doing Friday things on a Friday. We're going to get joined by Will here and maybe an extra special guest beyond that. But man, I appreciate you coming on the show and talking with me. It's it's quite the amazing thing, this X platform. It's contentious. People want to fight. People want to disagree. People want to disagree with what happens there. But what would you say is X these days? Is drastically different than what Twitter was. What is X?
Yeah, I think in regards to how it's different from what old Twitter was, is I think there's more transparency. Like, I think a couple of days ago they released the account label. So if there's a label put on your account, you can like you'll be notified of that, right? And I think that's a good step. Like, I'm still in favor of less moderation wherever possible. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
obviously there's some things, where if you break the law, governments have to step in. But beyond that, like, I'm not usually a big fan of social media platforms moderating. So that's still my stance. But the point being is, if you are going to moderate, the user should know exactly how and why you are moderating. So that's why I'm a fan of transparency. And I think social media platforms, they should be as transparent as possible, because at the end of the day, free speech and open discourse, it's a very fundamental human right. And if you're going to take that away from someone or diminish it in any capacity, there should be it should be clear why that is happening.
Yeah. There's responsibility there too. If you were the platform and you're going to have rules, you're going to have an appeal process, you're going to have robots that manage these things. You have a responsibility, especially if you're going to allow for monetization. You've got a responsibility to allow that person's business to not flourish, to do okay, but you can't get in the way of their flourishing and their existence because of indifference, systematic indifference. All these things that seem to be present before on Twitter. I think you and I had a minor interaction earlier this week. When President Biden first took over, I made a joke. And I used Zachary Taylor specifically because his name is old, rough, and ready. He's been dead for 150 years, and I talked about his followers getting up and punching somebody in the eye, because they were going to get riled up. Old, rough, and ready has no followers anymore, But I got the boot, and then I appealed and never got a response. And I, responded to that response as best I could, but I was completely locked out of my account basically until X came back. And then someone finally responded to an email years later, and I finally got my account back. But that kind of, if it happened to me, it's happened 1,000 times. That kind of indifference towards someone who's trying to use your platform is, I think that's a problem when it comes to free speech.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And there were many cases like that with old Twitter, and especially when Elon first came on board and started doing his thing at Twitter, new Twitter, which later became X. Myself and a few other accounts in the IDW anti-woke sphere, like, we were petitioning pretty aggressively to get, at the time the account was called at monitoring bias. We were trying to get monitoring bias on his suspension undone. And that was an interesting case because it wasn't like a permaban, but on paper it was a temporary suspension, but there was no way to appeal it and no way to like actually delete the tweet. Like, the button to delete the tweet, which would normally have gotten it undone, wasn't there for him. So
Right.
in effect, it was a permanent ban. So like, we spent, I think it was a good 1 or 2 months, just like, trying to get someone at new Twitter / X's attention. And finally, like, I made a post about it, and at the time, the head of trust and safety, Ella Irwin, she replied to me and saying, "Hey, we'll look into this case, and we'll begin the process of the general amnesty." Because I think it was 1 or 2 weeks before, Elon had done a poll asking if there should be a general amnesty, and thankfully the poll won by respectable margins. So people were expecting general amnesty, and then Ella commented on my post regarding monitoring bias, and then that kind of began the wave of amnesty. And I don't know if you were in that initial wave, like that's when you got
Mm.
your account back, but monitoring bias was restored then. And a good number of other people were as well. So um, it was a good thing to see. Like, I was really happy at the time to see accounts coming back online and people finding their
Yeah.
voices again.
I was not. It took some extra work, and I don't know why I got stuck. My tweet wasn't particularly racy or anything, and I wasn't, some kind of pole bearer on any part of the political spectrum. I just got caught up, in a machine that caught people. I just got ensnared. But this isn't about me. It's just illustrating the point of you can be a relatively innocuous user. There also was the element of shadow banning too, and when you're not obvious, you're not transparent, you're left to guess, and of course you're going to guess against something, and so like I could hit a limit of about 4,000, and I could race up to it and be doing really well. And then all of a sudden, boom, 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 and then boom, I would go down, and I was like, why can't I never get above that? And I would participate in the programs they offered, like, hey, if you do $100 a month, what kind of thing, and I would never get above that. And I was like, what is going on here? And because there was that lack of transparency, that lack of communication as a business, and we're talking Twitter, you're left to guess. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to spend $100 in something that I can't communicate with anybody. I can't interact with anybody. I'm just giving money and I don't understand what the service is giving me. So I'm out, and I stopped using it. But there's all kinds of things like that. And I don't know that Twitter's a whole lot better at that, but like I've got a blue check mark and I invested it because it's part of my business. What are your thoughts in terms of the return on being, blue checked, and any of the higher levels of things, the subscription model, in terms of being able to collect subscribers?
Absolutely. So I wanted to touch on the amnesty situation in your case. So I think right now, you're below 1,000 followers on X, and like that was like always like one of my biggest pet peeves with social media platforms, because monitoring bias, when he got banned, he was at around 60,000 followers, I think. Like, that's a respectable following, right? So like, he can stir up support. He has connections, and medium-sized to big accounts, we have connections. We can. We have a better chance of finding our way back to a platform. But like small accounts, like regular people, like they're the ones who are really being harmed by draconian speech policies. So I'm glad in your case it worked out, but that's like a lingering concern of mine for other small accounts, because I think I think empowering regular people, that's something that we got to be mindful of, especially like whenever possible. Like I don't know if I'm as active on freeing accounts as I used to be when Elon first took over, but whenever possible, I try to re-express support. Like one of my biggest points is permanent account bans should not be a thing. Like there's very, like even with like actual crimes, like there's very few crimes that impose life sentences. So a permanent account ban is, that to me is way too much. So I think it'll be cool if at some point social media platforms can move away from that being a part of their moderation toolkit. Like, I mean, and again, like this isn't like an implicit endorsement of other moderation tactics. I just think that at the minimum, permanent suspension should be removed, especially if you're a paying customer, you're a verified blue user. Because I get the argument behind banning bots like that. Like those aren't even humans, so fine, ban the bots. But if you're a verified human being, then I think permanent account ban shouldn't really be coming for you. And I guess that leads to the secondary point, which was your question on the ROI on paying for X premium and whether it's worth it. For someone like me, like I'm obviously a power user of the platform. Like I use it a good amount every day. I'm on my social bed right now. Like I think I average between like 50 to 100 tweets each day. So I'm a power user. So for me, it's worth it to use that. And the way that X works is that tweets are sorted by your subscription, right? So like X Premium Plus appears at the top of the replies, then X Premium, and then people who don't have a blue check at all. So like for someone like me who uses X a lot, it's definitely worth it. If you're trying to make if you're trying to build a following on X, I think it's worth it, because one of the best ways to build a following is just to be an active reply guy. And if you don't have the check mark, you're just going to get buried, and it's going to be very hard to build that initial following as a reply person. So I think for people like that, it's worth it. Like I think the X Premium Plus pricing is about $16, and one thing that I really appreciate is that they're releasing the Grok tool, and Grok is it's new, so it's going to take time for it to really be decked out, right? But ChatGPT, I think ChatGPT charges $20 a month for its tool. So $16 versus $20, I think for Grok, like Grok really makes it less. Like I think it's going to really win people over. Once Grok really takes off, like it makes the $16 price point for Premium Plus less intimidating, I think, and I think it's a better ROI. And I hope that's kind of the approach that they take. I think a lot of people have the mentality like, oh, like you shouldn't have to pay for free speech, and I sympathize. Like I think it's I think people got used to Twitter being free, and I mean there was blue at the time, like Twitter blue, way before Blue on old Twitter was like $3 a month, I think, if memory serves. And then after Elon, it was $8. So and I mean, you don't technically have to pay to speak, but it definitely does make a difference in terms of how many eyeballs are on your account. So I hope the approach that they take is they just keep dropping more things like Grok to incentivize people to sign up for Blue. And another angle to this is also the whole advertiser, right? Like any like Noam Chomsky talked about it in his propaganda model. Like advertisers are one of the they're like advertisers are how you enforce propaganda. Like meaning if you step out of line, a special interest can reach out to advertisers and say, hey, pull your money from this company. And we kind of saw that happen with X when the ADL and Elon had their beef, and there was the advertiser boycott. So I think also, having a lot of users on X Premium Plus, like I don't know if it's viable for that to replace the entire ad revenue that the company gets, but I think it'll definitely mitigate the dependence on ads. So I think it'll be good for them to diversify a bit in that regard.
Yeah. I got my fellas here jumping in. Brooks and Will, welcome to the show, fellas. I've got to figure out a little bit of echo between you guys. I'm not trying to see that. Okay, let me just continue talking, trying to figure that part out. We were talking about the subscription base. I'm going to echo you. We were talking about the subscription part of this. Also, there's the aspect of existing. If you exist on X at a certain level, I have just short of 4,000 people that follow my account. Because of that, I don't appear to have any authority. Yet, if you want to talk about a given topic, I've got a lifetime of authority, whether it's combat or ground truth, where I'm a published author, academically, gosh, you're going to struggle to find anybody in the world that's got more authority than me. My show has got over 2,000 episodes, but if you just look at my listener count, well, it's hard to have any authority, right? And so there's that thing of authority before notoriety, and how do you balance that? So you can have someone that really, someone who's famous for being famous has no real authority, but they have that notoriety. And there's a balance there too, where you can have an outsized voice and an opinion that doesn't have the authority and the experience to have that thing. So you're welcome to have free speech, but someone who actually comes in, like someone like John Spencer, I don't know if you've encountered John. John is an absolute expert in modern combat, and he actually goes to places like Israel. He goes to Ukraine. He already has a background of decades of knowledge. But if you don't know who John is, I don't care what he has to say, because, who is he, right? But it turns out he's the perfect person to be on X to talk about these things, because he gathers information from all sides, from all over the world.
And I think that's an interesting point. Like there's like a trade-off. Sorry, I don't know if that echo was from my end.
I think it's Will and the boys. I'm going to work on those guys in the backside. You keep going. I'm going to talk to those guys back channel.
Well, let's see. Actually, so my mic is muted right now. Like when I unmute and talk, do you hear an echo from me?
I didn't hear an echo right now. That was clean.
Okay.
I think it's the two of you guys together, maybe. I don't know.
I've been muted the entire time.
Yeah, no worries. So I think we were discussing like the trade-off between letting anyone build up notoriety versus actual experts, right? Like I think the challenge, like with anybody who wants to say something, is selling people on your ideas, right? Like I think like you could be the biggest genius on the planet, but if you don't know how to market yourself, if you don't know how to sell people on your vision, then no one's going to really buy it. Like I think that's always been like I think that tends to be a frustration point for for people who are quite smart and more academic. Like they obviously have like a lot to say, and like many of them are very intelligent, but like it's relatively rare to see people like Will who have a PhD, or who are very well accomplished academically, but also good at getting their message out there. So I think I think academics, if they want to like sell themselves on a platform like X, and I think learning how to sell yourself on a social media platform, like how to do self-marketing, those are definitely some valuable skills to have. And I think everyone's going to benefit once we, I think everyone would benefit in that scenario, because, I think normies, like they could use a bit of insight into academia. Like they could use, like they could dip their toes in that pool and get like some stuff out of it. Yep.
Yeah, I mean the whole. Okay,
so
that
that
time
time
there is kind of an echo going on. I don't know what's going on with this. Okay, now it's clean. All right, but yeah, the whole idea of the distinction between real and fake expertise is actually really interesting. I mean, and that's actually something you worry about kind of in the social sciences. Like there's this idea in academia, especially, that you really shouldn't talk to people outside of your very specific little field. And that's actually something I've been criticized for doing, and that people like Tom Sowell or military experts have been criticized for doing in the past, like writing books that smart general people read. Or, I mean, doing something like using social media. The idea really is that you're supposed to write, 50 very specific papers about exactly what it is that you focus on, like bees or wasps or something like that. And people in your niche area of bee and wasp research will read them, and you'll eventually come to a conclusion about what the correct perspective on wasp sexuality is. And then you'll kind of maybe release that in a textbook or something to the hoi polloi, and they will understand the word that has come down to them. And I think the problem with this is, one, that it's stupid. Like there are smart people across dozens of fields that can communicate with one another. So I want to hear what the new ideas are in business or archaeology or whatever. I'm not dating someone in the second field anymore. I'm not in business anymore. But what are they doing? And another issue is that a lot of fields aren't really all that trustworthy. Like I don't believe a lot of things that are said in sociology or climate science right now or something like that, gender studies. So if someone who's heterodox in those fields and who knows how to work with math wants to come out and say, no, these are just the real numbers. And you see this a lot on X, like Rabbit Hole is known for doing this. Fintelsil is known for doing this. I mean, people will just take government data and generally correctly and put it in a graph and say, okay, what do you think about this to a million people? I mean, I think there's a big place for doing that, but it's really controversial, I suppose,
To the
to the
extent
extent that anything academic is.
No, I think that was a good summary, and that's like a conversation I've had with I/show monitoring bias as well. Like it's like that trade-off between letting everyone have a voice and absorbing quality information. And like I think a skill that everyone's gonna have to build up on social media if they want to get the most out of it is just know how to curate the people they follow. And I think that's something to be mindful of. Like I don't use this feature enough, but like X has something called lists, and you can have a list for different topics. Like you could have your list of political people, your list of music people, engineering people, et cetera, and then and sort of just like use lists for various topics and like just deep dive whichever one you want depending on your mood. So I think information curation is going to be huge, especially and especially like considering like how much information is out there right now. Like it's too much for normal human beings to really take in, right? Like I mean like you could like right now, like since this podcast began like 15 minutes ago, like one person could spend a lifetime going through the information that was generated on X during 15 minutes and still not get through it all. So some curation is necessary if you want to get the most out of these platforms.
So that's reminiscent of is the problem of too much, and that is reminiscent. Like I'll make an analogy here. We're feeding back pretty good. Can you mute out?
I'm muted. Yeah.
Okay, good. An analogy I would give, and Will, I'm having Will's problem. You got me? Still.
It's still, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, that's just not working. I don't know what to do, Brooks. Are you guys in the same room?
Can you hear me now?
Maybe just talking to what?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm talking
Maybe,
to Wills. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, let's try that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in the opening up of the market in terms of information, I'm an optimist on that, but I'll give you an analogy. It's reminiscent to me of the comparison of the European wine market versus the American wine market, in that through time immemorial, as the European wine market further and further regulated towards a minimum standard of quality in the distribution, it also stifled innovation, such that once the U.S. wine market began to innovate and to experiment, what you ended up with was the entire distribution. So we made the worst wine on the planet, but we also, through innovation, made the best wine on the planet because of the broad distribution in terms of quality. So that is similar today, because we no longer have or 3 channels and 2 papers that kind of dictate what we're to learn and what we're to talk about. But the best can still comb through the information and find the signal through the noise, and that's who we're looking to in the conversation.
Yeah, and like I wanted to clarify one of my earlier comments as well. Like, when I say curation, like I'm referring to self-curation. Like I'm not arguing that platform should decide for you who you can and cannot follow, right? Like when I say curation, I mean like, you as a regular user on a social media platform, like you can decide who to follow. So like I think that's where you got to be a little mindful. And that's like the second half of my back and forth with monitoring bias on this topic. Obviously misinformation is going to be a thing, when you have that many people have a voice, right? But I don't see a way to really meaningfully tackle it without undermining fundamental human freedoms like, free speech, open discourse. And I mean, I think old Twitter tried, and I'm sure, and I mean, they debatably had good intentions, but I think that ended up being a major net negative. Like I really think a lot of the controversy over election integrity exists because of old Twitter's efforts to quote unquote manage misinformation. Like I just don't think it's possible to do that while giving people a voice, preserving free speech, and also maintaining trust with the general population. Like I think if you drive enough people out to other platforms like Parler and so forth, like you're going to really build a massive cult of conspiracy theorists, and that's not healthy for a society either.
The other thing you have to say when you say the words misinformation is pliable, changes, and we change our mind about what misinformation is. I mean, Laura Ingalls Wilder gets dug up about every 5 years, and we decide again what she is and what she's done wrong or right, and so what is information a lot of times too. I'm using her because she's been dead for 60 years, and there's someone we still haven't decided who she is and what's real about her. So we have this problem of we're trying to explain something complicated, like for example the Ukraine-Russia war, and they'll say, well, there's misinformation going on. Maybe that information is accurate from a given point of view that's telling the truth. And if you take an element of that truth and slightly twist it over, all of a sudden it becomes misinformation. You've got no earthly clue what actually is going on there in that information. And maybe it's actually accurate. It's so hard to know in so many cases. Now do that around the world in the case of X or Twitter, and it becomes very hard to accurately predict what misinformation is or isn't. It's basically impossible to do that. And you're going to have people who use the real truth to create what I call affects, to get a response to stimuli, to create things, even if it's 100% true, they can slightly twist that. So the information problem, it's not really something that someone can reliably impact anyhow. You really have to sort of let the mob decide that, I think. Is Will talking?
Yeah.
Okay, so this should be my last like mic issue or whatever. Okay, so after where we've all got it worked out, we got 4 of us now. We're all pretty tech savvy. But okay, so I guess my comment would be like after seeing fully unregulated X and even a little more unregulated Meta, I kind of have you can't let everybody in the club kind of understanding of what they were trying to do. I mean, I disagree with it as a starting point. But I mean, I think that the worry that the old Twitter executives had was something that to some extent has been borne out, which is that if you allow totally unregulated free discourse, what's going to win isn't going to be science or even Catholic theology. It's going to be bullshit. And I mean, there are levels to this. So, I mean, for example, you mentioned the account monitoring bias. I mean, that's an account that posts a lot of controversial statistics about, for example, race and IQ. There are certainly equivalents on the black side, like the account Great House, who argues that Europeans were barbarians until, whatever date, and, Indians and Nigerians and so on will agree with that guy. And you can at least say what those two guys are saying, but quite a lot of it is accurate. So that's one level where people are offended by that sort of thing. And you'll have these long running debates that go on for days if you look at these threads. But if we're being honest, there's a level beyond that. I mean, so there's an account on Twitter called Blacks Taking L's, like Blacks Taking Losses, that has 110,000 followers. And that regularly just posts absolute nonsense. African Americans are responsible for 60% of the crime in the country. I actually was interested and annoyed enough by that to look it up. The last year, it was a 21.7% of violent crimes, according to the BJS, had a black perpetrator. Blacks are 13% of the country. So the worry was that many people, and this is true of all races, it's true of men and women, if you look at the age gap dating debate, are going to be more attracted to prejudice nonsense than they are to reality. That was what the ex-executives were worried about. I think the problem with that, though, is that you have to have someone who decides what prejudice nonsense is, and that is a bigger evil. Yeah. So, I mean, like one of the things that was described as misinformation, I think we all remember, was every anti-Biden story, like the Hunter Biden laptop. And that probably did swing an American election. So, I mean, that is more influential than the existence of like Shaniqua posting delusions or crackers taking L's. These are all real pages, by the way. I have hundreds of thousands of followers across the different ethnic populations. It is really annoying. But I mean, I think what you have to have is something like community notes, where people can come in and say, no, that's just not true. You have to have that compromise. But I mean, in the end, I don't think you want like the Office of Information Management.
Yeah, and I think community notes is like, if we're going to have fact checking, like I think I prefer the community notes method versus what we had before, where it was just like legacy media outlets, just deciding, being the arbiters of truth, versus on community notes. It's a more communal process, and you can push back on a note. You can like people can write notes saying that, like arguing against another note. Like I think the communal process is a lot better for fact checking, and it inspires more trust than the old process did, for sure. And I think the old process with legacy media fact checking, there just wasn't enough transparency, versus a community note. I think a lot of the data is open source, and I think I might be wrong on this. I think that some of the code for it is open source too. So I think that's the way we got to do it if we are going to have fact checking. And I think community notes has been so far a decent way to detect total BS.
Oops. You had an exchange between yourself, Mark Cuban, and Elon Musk. We're all involved in this on DEI topics. And it's just an interesting thing. We can get into the DEI topic itself, but this is one of the amazing things about this platform. And everybody got along. I want to add a secondary note, because there are a lot of people that got upset. There's a Elon Musk sissy SpaceX, and for whatever reason, there was some kind of ghost in the machine, or whatever you want to call it, that kicked a bunch of accounts that were contrary to Elon Musk, and everybody started waving their hands like, hey, see, this is this censorship that's happening. But then a short time later, that was all repaired and everybody was back. So there's that element, but also you have this very contentious conversation about a very contentious topic between two worldwide heavyweights and yourself. Congratulations. And everybody's still friends. Everybody's still out there doing the X thing and still engaging and having these important discussions. What are your thoughts on the subtopic of, hey, if you fall into the trap and like someone put a picture up of a transmission, they're like, what's this called? If you write the word tranny, that thing's going to get pulled down and you can appeal it. And within minutes, I've done this several times, it'll be repaired. So there's that subtopic of, hey, is Elon Musk secretly banning contrary messages about him, which I don't think he is. And then there's that main topic of having a challenging topic and having really important people being able to engage with you or anybody else and still all end up being on the same platform and continuing to engage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I think on my end, like I'm not, and this kind of circles back to the earlier topic, right? Like I'm not the biggest. I'm very wary of social media moderation. Like I think it has to be done very carefully. And like one thing that I appreciate about X is that it seems like X has become looser in how it moderates over the past year and a half since Elon took over. With a couple examples being the bannings of Kanye West and Alex Jones. Like Kanye was unbanned, and then rebanned early into Elon's term, and I was a bit skeptical of that. Like I'm not the biggest. I wasn't very fond of what Kanye said, but like I think it's a little. I don't think banning in that case was a smart move, because and the way that I thought about it is this: like if you have someone spouting a conspiracy theory saying like, oh, you can't criticize this topic or you'll get banned, and then they get banned, it's like that's kind of pouring fuel on the fire, in my opinion. So I don't think his ban was very strategic in that regard. So I'm glad that it was reversed down the road. And with Alex Jones, like my understanding of the Alex Jones situation is that when old Twitter banned him, it wasn't even for stuff that he did on the platform itself. It was because he off platform said something about a CNN reporter, and they got offended, hit up their friends at old Twitter, and that's how he got banned. So I think, bringing Alex Jones back was the right move as well. Like, because again, from my understanding, his specific infraction wasn't even platform specific. It was more like, oh, he pissed off the wrong people. And I think more broadly, like, I think the less social media platforms rely on account bans, especially permanent account bans, the better. Like, I think we got to find other ways to tackle these issues. Like, I think, like, I am concerned about it, but like, I think, freedom of speech, but not reach. I think that's a better approach than just permanently banning someone. Like, I think post specific is better than account specific. So that way, like, like a person in their entirety is not permanently screwed on the platform. And like, one other thing is, and this is true of all social media platforms. Like, I think, they could stand to have better customer support. Like, I think the number of live humans that process these requests, like, I have the impression that it's not enough. And, there's very long wait times to get certain things to happen. Like, I know a good number of people who applied for the subscribers program, creators who applied for it so they could offer subscriptions. And there's people who've been waiting for 6+ months now. So I think having more people staffing the help desk at X, that'll definitely improve the customer experience side of things.
Yeah, part of that comes down to the Elon management approach also, where he fired about 75% of the people that worked at X just to make the point that he could do it, that they weren't doing anything productive or useful. And I tend to agree with him on that, but that leaves you with a shortfall when it comes to things like selling advertising, which is why there are all those ads for OnlyFans and so on the site. I mean, it leaves you with a shortfall when it comes to customer outreach. Tech platforms are as all you guys know, notoriously bad for that. I mean, you have to go into like stock filings just to get a number for them to call the damn places. And just so on down the line. And Twitter X may be the worst when it comes to that. So that's just a general comment on marketing, any of that kind of thing. Elon also, I think, would be kind of a nightmare to work for as a marketing executive. Where you're sort of saying things like, here, we welcome everyone, Jew and Arab, right and left, and the CEOs at conferences like, go fuck yourself. I mean, he's an interesting guy. You can't get around that.
Let's keep our geniuses predictable, right? That's the trade.
Yeah, keeps it interesting for sure. I think one add-on I have to what Will said is I think the issue with help desk staffing, like, that's been around for a very long time. Like, I watched the Dorsey podcast with his lawyer and Joe Rogan, and there was a point in the podcast where I forgot if it was Joe or Tim Pool. They asked Jack how many people he has staffing their help desks, and it was like an absurdly low number. And they were like, oh, that's it. And Jack's like, oh yeah, like that's like our total employees. And they're like, wait, that's total employees, not just the help desk. And it was like an awkward exchange. So I think kind of what Will said, like, tech just has a reputation for being bad at customer support, and I think it's unfortunately earned it. Like, I think tech platforms can do a better job of making people feel supported. And like, in my case, like, I personally don't have any issues, but it's more about the small accounts, like, because if something happens to me, people will raise a fuss, and I can probably get my way back. But smaller accounts, like, that's where the real concern lies.
Yeah, and one of the things here, and kind of last comment for me for a bit, but one of the things that I don't think a lot of people who come from the regular business world, haven't experienced the tech space, know is just how impossible it is to talk to anyone. There's one person I'm casually friendly with, Amy Therese from Australia, I believe, but who's had something like 8 accounts suspended around 40,000 followers. And it's just, there's this kind of chaotic mission that you go on when that happens. I mean, can you obtain like the original securities filing for the company and get a number? And when you call that, can you get some kind of division where someone can help? Can you have friends advertise for you so someone will bring you back? Do you have like an ex that works for that company? It's not at all what you'd get with any other company where you just call customer assistance and say, hey, I'm an executive that has this number of people that are associated with me at this company, and I have a problem. So yeah, there's like, the companies don't have listed phone numbers, and it's not just Twitter. I mean, it's Meta, it's all of them. So yeah, that's something that is a problem, and also I think is intentional, so that people with Roman statue profile pics and really strong opinions on Catholicism and Judaism can't just call your headquarters at all hours of the night. But it's pretty notable. Yeah. I think by this point at 100-some thousand followers, I have 2 contacts at Twitter.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing because everyone will tout that their platform is hey, this is great for creators, and I'm always like the first to say, is it? Let's take a look. Let's evaluate that. Are you a good business partner? No. Do you talk to me? No. Can I engage you to create a relationship? No. So are you a good business partner, or are you just trying to say, hey, this is a great place to create? I don't need a platform to create. I can do that myself across another platform and be ignored by somebody, right? And so when Elon or YouTube or whoever it is says we're the greatest spot for that, you have to deliver. You have to find tools to allow someone to grow and do something to amplify that, right? And Twitter has every opportunity to do that. I don't think they do it very well. They don't do it any better than YouTube. They don't do it. Who doesn't do it any better than Meta or any of the other ones. And there's a real opportunity there if they can get more human than the next company and help people gather a crowd, and build tools for that. Look, Elon Musk can figure this out, right? He's this genius guy. He's got all these people that can do things. Help develop the ability to break acts, right? That's what record companies did. Hey, this is a great act on Sunset. We're going to bring them into Capitol Records. We're going to break them and turn them into a national act. Well, that same thing applies. It's the same thing, but these platforms don't have that human element where they deal with that because they rely on technology. And so then you're stuck with the same people. Like here comes Don Lemon into X. That's great. He's got a big crowd. He wants to come to X. He wants to make money, but that doesn't allow someone like Rabbit to get even 10 times bigger, or me to get 10 times bigger, or someone who's 10 times smaller than me to get 10 times to where my size is. And there's a real gap there between performance and amplitude. And putting those things together. And actually, that's kind of where Brooks, you know a lot about technology. Do you have anything to say about this? We haven't heard from you for a while.
Well, I mean, in terms of solutions, I don't really have any. I mean, I think one of the problems that Will alluded to earlier in that what is popular is largely bullshit has to do with in terms of crowdsourcing, the quality of the crowd. And I mean, if I were to follow that, down the rabbit hole, to, its causal factors, I would have to say that, and this is going out on a limb here, but the classic conflict of interest between teachers unions who get what they want from a particular substrate of politician, with their sole output being 18-year-old voters across 3 generations, means largely a reduction in quality of the crowd. And I say that as the product of a public school education, which that really wasn't an answer to the question you're looking for in terms of technology. But
yeah, thanks. Thanks,
I
Brooks.
don't think the problem is technological.
Well, I don't think the problem is technological either, but I do think the problem is something that an entrepreneur who works at a place that claims to be a good platform for creators needs to put their head in and wrap around it and go grab an A&R guy and go, how do I break acts on this platform, and don't just say, hey, gather a crowd. Because if I go out and if I publish, I don't know, 15 shows a month, and if I'm on X and I can't gather traction in over 2 years, is X where I'm going to put my energy and money? No, I'm not. And I don't spend extra money on X because of that. I've tried ads and everything else. And so if I can be out there every day producing, putting great people on there, like Rabbit Hole, like Brooks has been on the show, like Will, and I put all kinds of other quality people on, I can't get traction, then I'm not the problem. X is the problem. I'll go somewhere else because I do get traction in other places, right? And so that's that thing that X has to figure out. All right, I'm going to shut up about me and shows and that kind of stuff, but I just wanted to make that point when we talk about platforms and humanity. Sometimes having a phone number, sometimes having a partner for establishing a business and helping people grow business makes you make more money if you invest in that kind of thing. That's just what Pete thinks, but maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, we've all actually done pretty well in business. And as a very basic business tip, like having your clients able to contact your business is something that you should probably consider doing. Like, I don't think Elon Musk needs advice from me on getting money, but that's one that's been a rule in tech for so long that I think those boys should consider changing it up. And I think that has something to do with the not mocking, but kind of autistic nerd culture in the tech space, where guys want to go into the basement and code all day, and they don't want to do that marketing bullshit, quote unquote. And, okay, someone lost their account. They shouldn't have lost that argument. I mean, I think that you would see much faster growth if that hadn't happened. Elon, by the way, actually has improved this. I mean, from a baseline of 0. But I mean, at least now some accounts are returning. He'll personally engage with people, that kind of thing. But there's a much more formalized way to do that. I mean, that's really the only point that I would even make there.
Do you think some of this is generational, Will?
Yeah. Well, what do you mean?
Well, in terms of a reduction in human interaction in terms of customer service, I'm not certain
Probably.
that it's not generational as a factor, not the single causal element.
Probably. I mean, so you see it more in tech and in social media, which are kind of young man and sometimes young woman's professions. And you see it more with the newer tech companies like TikTok, which is not only a company where a lot of the executives are 26, but that's based in China. I mean, like, there's no way to redeem a lost TikTok presence or lost money in TikTok. I mean, unless you speak fluent Mandarin. And I actually don't mean that as a joke. Like, their American office is staffed by like 7 people. So, I mean, yeah, like, but this is actually one of the big trends in society that I know Rabbit Hole's talked about, I've talked about, but just the decline in communication among young people, where, like, I think it's 27% of men, 18-year-old seniors graduating from high school, getting ready for the military or college, have ever had sex. You know, don't want to talk about their sex lives with people much older, but that's a weird kind of disturbing thing. And people blame shit that fits their political bill for that, like feminism or porn. But the real reason is that people just don't spend time together, learning about how to interact, going on dates, working jobs that start at 14. So does that kind of neurotic, withdrawn attitude, does that persist into customer service? Yeah, you see that all the time, where you go to the store and the clerk doesn't really know how to make change. And you ask, how was your day? And you get a dull grunt and so on. Yeah, I mean, if those are the people that are staffing your customer service, or the other alternative would be people in perhaps another part of the world, yeah, that's going to go pretty badly.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make a general comment. Like, I think to social media's credit, like, I think it's gotten easier for a random person to build a platform, because I think before social media, like, you would have to go to LA and like join Hollywood and like, just find those clicks, right? But now, anybody, and I'm not saying it's easy, it's obviously very hard, brutally hard, right? But anybody can make an account and at least try and put themselves out there, and with some discipline, consistency, and a good amount of luck, I think there's a better shot than what it was before. But I think there still is this extreme curve in the beginning, because even for my growth, like, I became active April of 2022, so April of last year, and 0 followers in April. So I spent 6 months just being a reply guy, doing what I could, and it took me 6 months to get to about 6,500 followers, and then Elon started engaging with me because he noticed my graph in one of his slides, and that's when it really popped off. And then in the next 6 months, I went from 6,500 to, like, I think 300,000. So, but the point being is, like, that initial curve, like, to build your initial long, like, that takes a very long time, and it's really hard. And that's why I think, Pete, I don't know if you've been in those subscriber spaces, but, like, that's why I'm always telling my subscribers, like, hey, for those of you who want to make a living on social media, just think twice, like, make sure you have a backup plan, make sure you have a good amount of savings, something to fall back on, because social media is very volatile and it's hard to do. And there's also the risk of losing your account. And, hopefully that never happens on X to any of you guys, or to any of my subscribers, or just anybody in general. But that is a risk. Like, so I think that's why in my personal case, I've kept my 9-to-5 job, and I plan to keep it as long as I can. So I think, and this is general advice to anybody out there who's considering social media, just be careful, like, make sure you have a good plan going in, and make sure you have a fallback and a safety net built for yourself and your loved ones.
Yeah, and actually that's a good reminder from Rabbit Hole there, in terms of the complaints about social media. Like, yeah, the company is maybe run by amoral autists that don't answer the phone and so on. But yeah, like, it obviously has enhanced your ability to come as a young musician or comic or something like that, and increase your public profile. There's really no doubt about that. I mean, there are all kinds of regulations and restrictions that you probably wouldn't have had performing in small clubs in New York or Mississippi. But the idea that you can do something, and now through Twitter, even Facebook, Instagram, 100 million people can see it. Yeah, that is extremely significant. And essentially random people go viral all the time. So the idea that any of us would have similar presences, I mean, the rabbit hole, again, there are positives and negatives of this. I mean, so people like Elon Musk and Ted Cruz will now regularly retweet what are essentially, and no offense to me or Rabbi or anybody else, but like guys on the internet, and say things like, yeah, this guy says that there's a real problem with the Houthis. And, you see policy about to be made, and you can ask whether or not that's a good thing. But when it comes to the promotion of businesses or, careers or something like that, yeah, it clearly has had a very significant positive impact. I see that is hard to deny.
Yeah. And like, I think I'm a bit more pessimistic on the state before social media. Like, I think there are always like bad actors, like, and at least now these politicians can be influenced more directly by the people. So like, it kind of balances out those backdoor people. It's like, I think the coolest thing about social media is just the fact, like I think it's like a yin and yang, like, here and there, like big names will find some idiot and amplify them, right? But then there's also cases where where like random people like myself can find a voice, and and someone end up in debates with Mark Cuban. And I mean, and to Cuban's credit, like, and he didn't block me. So, and a lot of people would have. Like, I got blocked by Nicole Hannah-Jones when I was under 1,000 followers, I think. So, and Cuban got, and what Cuban went through, like, was honestly much worse than anything I did to Nicole Hannah-Jones. And not that I did anything bad to Cuban, but like the level of publicity that our debate got was way more than a 100 impression comment on that got buried in Hannah's section anyway. So, so just credit to Cuban where it's due. Like, I respect that he didn't block me. I think he blocked Elon though, but in my case, I got off scot-free.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Cuban, also, to be fair, is a lot smarter than Nicole Hannah-Jones. I mean, that was something that I noticed with woke people when I used to debate them a lot back in the day. There weren't really so Sarah Brash. I love Sarah Brash. Sarah Brash chips in and says, "I'm also blocked by Nicole Hannah-Jones." Yeah, I mean, a pretty common technique on that kind of Ibram Kendi side of the internet is just to cancel or block anyone who disagrees with you, because there's not really a comeback. I mean, the response, I mean, both myself and Rabbit Hole have asked the good Dr. Kendi and some similar people, if every gap in performance between groups is caused by racism, why are Asians and Nigerians and Indians and so on kicking everyone's ass? And there's just never an answer. It's just always, I don't have time to educate you or something like that. And then, a move to another topic. So I'm not surprised that Cuban, who's a smart businessman who just likes diversity, is down there in Texas. He just took the L and then, went on making millions of dollars.
I got blocked. Go ahead, man. Go ahead. I was just going to say something dumb. Just go ahead.
Oh, no, you're good. No, I don't want to say it, but I think Will said it. Like, Cuban is a lot smarter than many of these DEI people. Like, I mean, it sounds rude to say, but like, honestly, I think there are good examples of dumb people being given a platform.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is actually an important point. Like, I'll debate the exact numbers. Like, I had this conversation earlier today where I looked at some of the IQs that were attributed to HBCUs, and I actually, like, I mean, there's an IQ to SAT conversion chart, and for both white non-selectives and for HBCUs, the actual IQ wasn't like 80 or something; it was like 102. But I mean, like, you can still have that conversation. One, should people with an IQ of 100 be going to college most of the time, or should a lot of them be driving a bus? No offense. And beyond that, how does it affect our leadership class if we expect 70% of the population, at least among white and African-American males, to head to college? And in those institutions at the same time, we're practicing affirmative action, we're engaging in legacy programming as well, all of this stuff. Wouldn't you expect a lot of our leaders to be fundamentally stupid? Like, I keep asking that question. I've asked it in some pretty high-level meetings. Like, wouldn't a lot of these people be dumb as shit? Like IQ 102, 10 points. And like, no one ever answers it. And I'm not asking it glibly. Yes. I mean, I think a lot of these people are pretty dumb. And I think that's why they keep losing arguments with you.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a valid point. And like, I think we've already kind of seen some of the effects of that, right? Like, I mean, you can only have demographic preferences for so long until it starts affecting your society, right? And I think that's what Cuban doesn't understand. Like, there's a real trade-off to be made. Like sure, you can say that you're still looking for merited individuals, but if at the training level and at the hiring level you're considering their race, gender, et cetera, their demographics, you're engaging in demographic engineering, and there is going to be a trade-off from meritocracy. And I think that's frankly why so many politicians and woke people, they hate businessmen like Elon, because in order to succeed in business, and which Cuban has to his credit, and Elon has to his credit, like you actually have to be very competent, because that's a cutthroat world. I've had a good amount of success on X, but that's different from but I would argue that making a real business, like a company, that's much harder. And so I mean, when you put like woke people up against business people, it's clear who the winner is going to be in terms of competence. And I think that's why there's like that natural tension between those two classes.
Yeah.
And I think Elon would say also that if you wanted to get a job at, say, SpaceX, 99.99% of the people in the world aren't going to, let alone the nation, California, most everybody can't get a job there. I mean, you just don't have the credentials and the intelligence. He's not going to hire someone who gets 102 IQ, even to drive a damn bus. They're going to be pickier. It's not an easy place to get hired because they're not doing easy shit. It's hard to build rockets. There's only so many places on the earth where you can build rockets, and that's one of them. And that's a real difference maker. And so when you're hiring and doing hard shit, you don't hire simple people. You just can't. And that's because they're doing serious business down there. So I want to make sure that we keep an eye on. We got about 10 minutes left before we hit the hour. So I don't want to take all of our time up without saying, hey, we got about 10 minutes left. So what do you want to make sure we get into rabbit hole before we start to wrap up?
Honestly, anything. So far I've been enjoying the natural flow of the conversation. So whatever we land on, I'm happy to discuss.
Brooks, I want to bring you in because you don't get the yap. You're yap enough.
Yeah, well, so I want to piggyback on to the smart question. I mean, obviously, Mark Cuban is very intelligent. He's brilliant in his lane. There's a difference between being smart and being read in. I seriously doubt that Mark Cuban knows the origins of DEI and the trail of neo-Marxism, from through academia. I don't think he's read into that, and that kind of falls for the Mott Bailey, dual argument of language in terms of, you have on the one side, you've got a word like inclusiveness that everybody should agree on, and you use that word inclusion, and the average bear, likely Mark Cuban, I doubt he's in on this, says, well, yeah, we should be inclusive. But then the Mott turns to Bailey on the inside track, where what we mean by inclusion is including the orthodoxy and to the exclusion of the heterodox. And that is neo-Marxist tactics. So the first casualty in war is the truth. And we were talking about that previously, in terms of what is truth and who, the question is not what's true, but who decides what's true, to borrow from the old Tom Sowell quote. That's going to be a problem, but it's complicated by the fact that there's an entire linguistic war being waged by people that don't believe that there is such a thing as truth, that words are weapons, and that there's nothing but power. And so taking all that into account, you have to factor that in. And Mark Cuban is not, I don't believe, read into that part of the discussion. I believe he's falling for the Mott and doesn't recognize the Bailey.
Yeah, no, I think you absolutely nailed it there. And that's the vibe that I got in my exchanges with him. It seemed like, I mean, I'm sure Cuban's done a bit more reading than this, or he's engaged more with DEI than this, but the way he presented himself was pretty bad. It came across he had been given a pamphlet, spent 5 minutes, and was just spouting off the talking points, right? And and I think Cuban was so caught off guard, I think he selected my account at random. He's like, oh, it's just a bunny. What's gonna happen? And then, I joked about it on my timeline after. I was I made a tweet. In quotes, I was like, LOL, I'm arguing with a random bunny account, and then it's the random bunny account, and then I put my picture as the sort of like a meme format. So I think that's kind of what happened with Cuban. I think he selected someone at random who he thought was going to be a dumbass, and then I ended up actually having a good amount of data to support my claims, and and it got so bad that at one point he was making statements that contradict the Civil Rights Act. It's like no, you can't just, if you can't specifically seek out purple people. Harvard actually can't discriminate without violating the Civil Rights Act to some degree. Like it's you know, like that was awkward. Like he ended up deleting the Harvard tweet, but I think he left the Purple People tweet up. So yeah, that was interesting.
It's got big teeth. Classical reference. That actually just one sentence while I still have the big picture on the screen. That's something the left does all the time. So like when there was a discussion of DEI, which is a very specific corporate program that we've all seen, possibly all administered. It's an equity program. When there's a discussion of DEI, someone will ask, don't you like diversity, you racist fuck? That's not what it means. It's the same thing like Antifa. We're anti-fascist protesters. I mean, no, you're not. You're the street fighters from the left brawling with the Proud Boys. Like everything is like this. So you just have to unpack like, well, okay, what do you mean? And I don't mean to be glib, but even something like we were assaulted. What does that mean? Speech is violent. What does it mean? It's just all the manipulation of words by kind of word cells who think that changes reality.
Yeah, and like I've made the argument that like diversity and inclusion would not be that bad if it wasn't for the E, which is equity, right? Because I mean, if if it's just a matter of like if diversity is just a matter of like accepting people and like being okay with like diverse groups, then I think most people are okay with that. I mean, interracial marriage support is at 96%. Like that's very high, and it actually went up during this last decade, despite the Great Awakening, right? Like if inclusion means like, oh, we're okay with having different diverse neighbors, which also 95% support, despite the Great Awakening. Like, I think people are okay with those two things, but the issue, in my opinion, is equity, like, which is essentially saying like, okay, you have to take these diverse groups of people and forcibly include them, and we must also ensure equal outcomes, right? And so like, one of the points that I've been making for a good amount of time is that I think we need to just put the message out there like, oh, equity isn't equality. Like, it's like a Mott and Bailey kind of like, like where people think that they're still fighting for equal opportunity under the law, which I think we're all for. But in reality, equity is trying to push for equal outcomes, and is essentially a forcing mechanism for the entire DEI apparatus.
So somebody who's going really down that rabbit hole and kind of on the leading edge on this is James Lindsay. He and Pete Boghossian and Helen Pluckrose had the grievance study affair, and he's really going down that rabbit hole again. Sorry, in terms of solutions. One of the solutions that we're going to have to implement is linguistic discipline. We're all going to have to get on the same page as to what we will say and what we won't say. I will no longer say biological male. Sex is a function of biology. It's redundant. There are males and females. That's how I will say it from now on. So, kind of breaking the code of the dual use words and figuring out, how to navigate that properly. It will require discipline, and I think he's onto something there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, like, I think there's that quote, right? Like, freedom is only one generation away from extinction. So, I think, that argument that we got to be vigilant and like actually use words the way they're meant to be used and actually understand what is being said and unpack things. Like, I think that's the responsibility that comes with being a free citizen in the free world. And, if we don't want the responsibility, then frankly, we deserve to lose our freedoms.
One of the things I had some ladies in the show the other day, they were talking about the DEI topic in general, and I'm glad to listen and learn and expose people to other points of view, whether I agree with them or not. And I'm not saying I do or don't, but towards the end of the show, I said, what happens when DEI gets it wrong? What's too far? What's not enough? And they openly said it's an exchange of power, and I'm like, whoa, like, okay, that's a different thing. That's a different contract. And when you take the E and you pull it out, I think the letter you want to put in there is U, because I explore this topic all the time. Is diversity? It's not a perfect antonym, but the antonym you need to look at is unity. And if you only focus on diversity, at some point you just get chaos and nothing works. You have to have some unity in that balance, and that means a common culture. You can't just diversify and divide and divide and divide and divide. At some point, you have to have something that unifies and leads and takes us in a single direction. Otherwise, you just don't get anything done. And that's why they call it herding cats and all these things that illustrate what too much of separation creates. And so I don't want to say DUI is the acronym, but we have to have something that does unite us, because right now we do divide a little too much. And so how do you find someone that can And, the hallmark of a great statesman is consensus, right? How do you build a consensus if everything's constantly focused on division? So you have to, find that balancing point between unity and diversity. We want everybody to be involved. We also want everybody to let's all agree on going in a direction where it's for the common good, at least until we decide to change directions.
Yeah, and I think Vivek has made this point where we spend so much time focusing on our diversity, aka difference, that we kind of forgot the things that unify us across our differences / diversity, right? So I think having a U would be a lot more healthy than the E for that reason. And just a quick second note: was the DUI pun intentional or?
I was being a little bit funny because I had my my Friday evening drink today, so
It's amazing.
it's
I love it.
a little clever.
Well, DUI is a better acronym than die. They're all the HR acronyms, and in terms of like our leaders of IQs at 95, they're all awful. I mean, I will say that's a good, almost book level idea. This sort of concept that obviously we're a diverse country. That's not even a disadvantage, which I think a lot of people on the right are moving toward thinking. There are real advantages of diversity: decreases groupthink, better food and dating, higher patent rate. I mean, you can just go on and on with this. But diversity only works under two conditions: one, everyone's equally qualified; and two, people aren't racists who hate each other. So the DI, like, people have to get used to living around each other. And I don't even know if you need the U, although I think it's good, but just inclusion. And then everyone has to work together. You don't allow the white kids or the black kids to be bullied if you're a coach, that kind of thing. That's pretty much it. The equity, I mean, the idea that black people should be exactly as good at white people as white people at golf, or something like this, that in every field of competitive performance, every group should perform equally. There's no society where that's ever happened, ever in history. That's just a communist fantasy. So yeah, I mean, I think ditching the letter is more productive than kind of ditching the idea of living in a multiracial civilization.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that. I think there's a lot of good to be had from diversity and inclusion, but it's the forcing mechanism of the E that really poisons the batch.
In the Mott sense, I would agree with you, Rabbit Hole. In the Bailey, I don't.
And I'm still going to stick in for the U, because you do need some kind of consensus. Otherwise, there is no group, and you can't be included if there is no group. You have to have some kind of uniting feature in your diversity. Otherwise, it's just, you can't have a complex compound. You just have a bunch of elements that become nothing. You have to have something that creates gravity. And that culture, at some point, has to unite. Otherwise, you don't have a thing. You have things. There has to be, leaders have to be able to gather people. A military unit can't accomplish anything if there's no unit. You can't have a unit if there's diverse.
I mean, we are a nation founded on an idea, and that's an exception, in history. And I think the idea is the thing that should be the uniting factor.
Yeah, I like that message. I think like one thing that people's got to remember is that the ideas that America was founded on are pretty good. Frankly, like, freedom of speech. All men are created equal. And regardless of our differences, like, if you're an American, like, we do have one shared identity, which is being American, and sharing this country. And like, it's in our shared best mutual interest to make this country the best that it can be.
Yeah. Let's go around the horn here. Brooks, anything in closing?
No, just a wonderful conversation. It's wonderful to finally speak with you, Rabbit Hole. Want to applaud you on the work you did, and thanks again for having me.
Thanks, Brooks. Good to see you again, too, on my end.
Too, brother.
Well,
yeah, not much to say. I mean, Rabbit Hole's the guest, so he's going to close it out. I mean, I think the one thing I took away is the E is the big problem with DIE. Really, I mean, we're not getting away from diversity, inclusions, just what your ball coach told you 20 years ago. The problem is the idea that everyone should finish equally. And when you think about it, it's a really weird concept. It's one of those communist things that's been backdoored into society. I could go on a rant right now about, like, you should never date anyone younger than you or a man richer than you. It's all this crap that we've come to believe for no reason. But anyway, the E is the problem.
Rabbit Hole, the floor or the hole is yours.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. I just wanted to thank you for the platform. It was a pleasure, as always, to be here. I enjoyed talking to you all. Brooks, it was a pleasure to meet you and have this conversation. Definitely down to have this group come together again in the future. I think what Will said kind of sums up my thoughts too. Like, I think if we can discard the E, it'll be to everyone's mutual benefit, and the country will move in a better direction. I think we just got to understand, and that's the thing too. It's like, you're trying to have equal outcomes while also having diversity and inclusion. And it's like, with diversity, it's like, you're injecting more variables into an environment. The more variables you have, then you're creating a wider array of outcomes. So, I mean, having equal outcomes with more and more expanding variables in your set, like it's a fool's errand. So I think, dropping the E, that's the way to go. And we got to celebrate our differences, but also find what unites us across those differences. So I think with that, I'm done. Thank you, Pete.
Yeah. All right, let me run this credits. We'll be right back to say goodbye to you guys.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank